We just had college football week 9. It was a pretty fun, fairly eventful Saturday of football. And there are 8 games I briefly want to talk about. Then I want to share my personal top 6 teams in college football. I ranked them all in order. You can decide if you agree or not. But first, before we do that, game number 1, number 8 Michigan State beat number 6 Michigan 37-33. Man, by now we have learned what Jim Harbaugh is as a coach. It's been plenty of time at Michigan in Ann Arbor. Michigan is a fine football program. They win a lot of games. They're fun to watch. But with Jim Harbaugh as the coach at Michigan, that football program is never going to make the college football playoff. And it's been year after year after year. Jim Harbaugh has had so many opportunities to clinch a signature win. We were like, there's the win over Michigan State. There's the win over Ohio State or Penn State. And it hasn't happened. Every year, Michigan's pretty good. And they just can't quite get over the hump. And I mean, literally, I'm not the kind of guy that says, you can't win the big game. I think there is, I look at Kirk Cousins, for example, in Minnesota. I think there is something to that. I think Kirk Cousins really does get really stressed in big moments. But even though I tried to never be the guy, he can't win a big game. People said that about Matthew Stafford for years in Detroit. That's just not true. He's always on a terrible football team. But when year after year after year, you see Jim Harbaugh losing key games to Michigan State, Ohio State, it's just enough is enough. He's shown us who he is. I'm going to believe him. Year after year, Michigan finds a way to lose a big game. And this year, Michigan was up 30-14 over Michigan State, and they lost the game. They lost, even though they were up by, 14, 16 points, and you lost. Now, shout out to Michigan State running back Kenneth Walker, 23 carries, 197 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then what about Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker? Mel Tucker, it's only his second year in East Lansing, and he's got his team 8-0, undefeated. They beat Michigan. Michigan State still has to play Penn State and Ohio State, but I would imagine LSU, who does not have a coach for next year, I would believe they're pursuing Mel Tucker pretty hard. But, despite praise Mel Tucker, despite praising Michigan State, the storyline really here is that when people show you who they are, you believe them. And Jim Harbaugh, year after year, has shown us who he is as a coach. He's not bad. He's certainly nothing shameful in winning the way he's won. He's won a lot of games in Michigan. Or at Michigan, maybe it's the right way to put that. I didn't go to Michigan, so I don't have the English degree from there. But and English is hard to say anyway, to speak anyway. Jim Harbaugh, though, we've seen it year after year. He hasn't won key big games. And I think to expect him to from this point on, and I think I said this last year even, it's just silly. Stop expecting Jim Harbaugh to win big games against Michigan State or Ohio State. It's not going to happen. It hasn't happened. Until he shows he can, no one should ever believe he will again. And I mean, the Michigan fans I talked to going into this football game were like, we think we're going to get exposed next week against Michigan State. Somebody even wrote in with that on Patreon. So I think Michigan fans realize who they are. And then the question is, a lot of people are saying, should Jim Harbaugh be fired? It's well, you have to decide, what do you want? Is Michigan okay not beating Ohio State, not beating Michigan State when they have a good year? Or are they satisfied winning 9 or 10 games a year and being very, very good? Or does Michigan want even more? Does Michigan want to get to the college football playoff? If they do, they probably got to find a better coach. But it's hard to fire a coach like Jim Harbaugh, who's winning a ton, but isn't quite winning enough. Because do you risk losing Jim Harbaugh and going, taking a step backward as a program? So a lot of interesting conversations are going on at Michigan. Personally, I think you got to realize, hey, you're a tough academic school in the Big Ten, and you're winning a lot of football games. I think you should just be happy. But the question is Michigan happy with what they're doing, and do they want even more out of their football program? Game number 2, number 18 Auburn beat number 10 Ole Miss 31-20. This is a really fun football game. Auburn quarterback Bo Nix played really, really well. He was 22 for 30 passing with 276 yards, 1 touchdown passing, 2 more rushing. I like Bo Nix, man. Bo Nix is a guy that I don't know if I just need to watch his film. I feel like I say this every week. I don't really know where he's going to land as an NFL quarterback. I need to do a deep dive into his film, but every time I watch Bo Nix, I see good stuff that I like, and I'm like, well, it wouldn't shock me if Bo Nix ended up being a good quarterback in the NFL. I don't know that I have enough film analysis done on my end to make a declaration like that. It was pretty sad. Ole Miss had multiple opportunities late in the game to make it interesting. They could not do that. In the third quarter, Ole Miss had multiple turnovers. They turned over the ball on downs 2 times in Auburn territory. That's brutal for Ole Miss. And then late in the fourth quarter, they threw an interception in the end zone. Ole Miss kept getting in their own way. I mean, they just it was a much closer game than 31-20 would suggest, but Ole Miss just could not make key plays when it mattered most in the second half. Now, the other game I watched that had no bearing on the college football playoff, there's only one more. Every other game we'll talk about from here on out is about in relation to the college football playoff. But number 11 Notre Dame beat unranked North Carolina 44-34. It's another fun game, man. UNC made it interesting. I was surprised they were able to hang around. I mean, for 3 quarters, this was a really good, really interesting, fun football game. There was a moment where Notre Dame was only up 31-24. UNC had the ball, and North Carolina couldn't score. Then Notre Dame had a 91-yard touchdown run by Kyron Williams. That kind of sealed the deal there. But, man, there was a moment where Notre Dame fans were like, we can't put this team away. And Notre Dame pulled away late. Again, for 3 quarters, it was a great football game. It was very interesting. UNC quarterback Sam Howell had a 31-yard touchdown run at the end of the fourth quarter to make it 44-34. But the true star of the game was Notre Dame running back Kyron Williams. He had 22 carries for 199 yards and a touchdown. So I wanted to give a shout out to that game. No one's probably going to talk about number 11 Notre Dame against an unranked UNC football team, but it was just a fun, interesting, exciting game. I watched the entire game, and I had a blast watching it. It was just a good time. Okay, now let's talk about the college football playoff teams, or teams in the hunt for the college football playoff. Number 1, Georgia dominated Florida 34-7. There's nothing really super noteworthy from this game other than the fact that Georgia is now 8-0. They look untouchable. It was 24-0 at halftime. I was hoping that, like, Georgia-Florida is this legendary matchup. It's in Jacksonville. I was hoping for a better game. It wasn't very good. Like, not because Georgia played great, but it wasn't fun to watch because it was so one-sided. Number 4, Oklahoma beat Texas Tech 52-21. The storyline here is that Caleb Williams, the Oklahoma quarterback, is, in my opinion, a future number 1 overall pick. He was 23 for 30 passing with 402 yards and 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. Like, Caleb Williams, the way he runs the ball with speed and with power, he can extend plays. He's got a huge arm. I mean, I love watching Caleb Williams play. He's probably my favorite quarterback to watch in college football right now. And I only have 2 questions about Oklahoma right now. Number 1 is, where will Spencer Rattler transfer to? Maybe Arizona State. I don't know. Like, Spencer Rattler, the former Oklahoma starting quarterback who got benched, who clearly has a lot of talent and I also think is very immature. He's going to go somewhere, and that's going to be a really big story in college football when that happens, because he has soundly lost his job to Caleb Williams. Now, number 2, I wonder, like, Oklahoma led this game 38-7, and so it's weird to criticize their defense given the fact that they, for most of the game, shut down Texas Tech. But I still wonder, can Oklahoma's defense hang with an Alabama, Ohio State, even Georgia? And I'm not impressed by them dominating Texas Tech. Texas Tech has 2 quarterbacks. They're not a great football team. Every week I feel like Oklahoma's defense has a play or two where I'm like, and I give Oklahoma the side eye. I'm like, that's bad defense. You got mossed, you got embarrassed, you blew a coverage, and I'm very interested to see Oklahoma match up against an Alabama or a Georgia, mostly because I want to watch their offense. Like, I really think Caleb Williams against a great defense is going to be really, really fun. Like, Caleb Williams against an SEC defense sounds amazing to watch just because I'm curious about him. But I want to see Oklahoma's defense and get a real solid understanding of how good are they, and are they a team that dominates because they play bad competition, or is the defense actually? I don't know. The defense has been really, really questionable to me all year, and maybe that's carryover from the last couple of years. Maybe that's just my impression generally of the Oklahoma program. But every time I watch Oklahoma, I go, that's a bad play on defense, and there's one or two every game that makes me go, that's really concerning. Okay, number 2 ranked Cincinnati beat Tulane 31-12, and Cincinnati only led this game 14-12 at halftime. I understand Cincinnati being in the top 4. I get it that people want a fun, cool story for the college football playoff, like, ooh, Cincinnati. But anybody who has Cincinnati ranked number 2 in the country, or even number 3, it's just silly. I mean, it just, you can't look competitive with Tulane for an entire half and then be the number 2 team in the nation. I mean, it's just disingenuous. It's weird. I think Cincinnati's fun, but they're not. They're nowhere near like one of the 4 best teams in the nation. I think it's okay if they get in because it's fun, but I just can't. I can't with the right mind say that Cincinnati's even the number 6 best team in the nation, let alone number 4 or even number 2. Like, they were ranked number 2 in this last week. I'm like, well, how? How was Cincinnati the 2nd best team in the nation last week? There's no way. Number 5 ranked Ohio State beat number 20 ranked Penn State 33-24. Ohio State feels like a team that we should not overlook. I mean, if they get an opportunity, I think they can compete with any team in the country, bar that maybe they can't. Maybe Georgia would dominate Ohio State, but every other team in the country feels like a team that Ohio State may not beat, but is at least competitive with and really interesting to play against. And Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud is playing very, very well. He impresses me every week, so do not write off Ohio State just yet. And finally, number 13 Wake Forest beat Duke 45-7. Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman had 5 touchdowns, 3 passing, 2 rushing. Wake Forest is 8-0. Like, very quietly, they've snuck under the radar. And Wake Forest has 4 games left. They play at UNC, then they play NC State. Then on November 20th, they play at Clemson, and on November 27th, Wake Forest plays at Boston College. That is 4 really tough football games. I would be surprised if Wake Forest really did finish the year 12-0 and then 13-0, winning the ACC championship. But if they do, let's say Wake Forest does somehow go 13-0, do you really leave them out of the college football playoff? I don't think. I guess Wake Forest would make it in. I don't know. It seems unlikely for them to go 13-0, but it's not impossible. And if they do go 13-0, that's going to cause a really difficult conversation for the college football playoff committee. If you have, unbeaten Cincinnati, unbeaten, what if Michigan State runs the table? I don't think they will, but and then you have Ohio State, and then you have Wake Forest, and then man, it's just interesting. I don't know. I don't know what would happen. There's no crazy. It would be insane to me if Michigan State was undefeated at the end of the year. Same with Wake Forest, but if that does happen, it's going to cause some really difficult conversations for the college football playoff selection committee. Okay, we are 9 weeks into the college football season. Here is my top 6 after week 9. Feel free to write in. What order would you put the teams in? And I'm curious, if anyone has their own top 10 or I was going to give a top 4 because I want to do the college football playoff. I'm like, well, I should at least tell you where some of the other best teams are. So this is my top 6. I'm curious what order you would put these teams in. My number 1 team is Georgia. No one's going to disagree here. It's very clear. It's very obvious. They're undefeated. They're dominating the SEC. Nobody's going to disagree that Georgia is the number 1 team in the country. Now, my number 2 team in the nation is Alabama. And in my head, it feels wrong to not give Alabama the respect they deserve. Yeah, they lost the game earlier this year to Texas A&M. We'll say it, just put it out there. But also, Alabama can beat anybody. They're the number 2 team in the country. They're the 2nd best team in the country. So I think Alabama should be ranked number 2. I saw in the most recent college football playoff ranking, they were. At number 3, I have Ohio State. Ohio State will likely win the Big Ten title. The only loss Ohio State has was they lost to a really good Oregon football team, and I'm like, well, I think that Ohio State, if they win out from here on and win the Big Ten, I just would be hard to if I had like Wake Forest and Ohio State, or Wake Forest, or maybe like Cincinnati and Ohio State. Like, sorry, I don't really care if Cincinnati's undefeated. Ohio State with one loss is still a better football team, and so I think Ohio State's a lot better than they're getting the respect for. Now, out of Michigan State is also undefeated, so is Oklahoma. I believe Ohio State is the best team of those teams I listed. On Saturday, November 20th, Michigan State plays at Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio. We're going to learn a lot from that game. Now, my number 4 team in the country right now is Oklahoma. They had a couple of close games early on this year. Then they benched Spencer Rattler. They put in Caleb Williams at the quarterback position. He elevated this team. Things might have been different if Caleb Williams had played all year rather than Spencer Rattler. I thought Spencer Rattler at times held back Oklahoma's football team on offense, and that's part of why like the Tulane game was close. The West Virginia game was close as Spencer Rattler wasn't playing very well. So Oklahoma's 9-0. I think they're better than some of the box scores from earlier in the year were a lot closer than people might be comfortable with. Part of that's because the quarterback position was wrong for them. I want to watch the Oklahoma offense against an SEC football team. Watching Caleb Williams against Alabama would be really, really fun. Kind of reminds me of the year we got to see Kyler Murray against Alabama. I want to see that happen. Number 5, I have Michigan State. They're the only undefeated team left in the Big Ten. They still have not played Penn State or Ohio State yet, though, so we'll see what happens there. And then number 6, we have 8-0 Cincinnati. For the record, I hope Cincinnati gets into the college football playoff. I think it'd be fun. But we need to have a nuanced conversation. Like, does strength of schedule matter? Are they truly one of the 4 best teams in the country, Cincinnati? I don't think so. I'm not even sure that Cincinnati is the number 6 best team in the nation. Like, I rank Cincinnati number 6. I think Oregon's probably better than probably. I think Oregon is better than Cincinnati. So I would put Cincinnati at 6 because I like the story, and that does matter to me. But I certainly can't put Cincinnati as one of the top 4 teams in the country. I feel uncomfortable putting them at 6, but like, it's fun, so why not? I'm really curious. Like, Wake Forest, Oregon, Cincinnati, Michigan State right now is keeping themselves in the hunt. You've got Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. All these teams are just kind of in the nebulous, just sitting around waiting, and we will see. I'm really excited to see what happens in the college football playoff rankings as the year goes on. The national title really does feel like a battle between Alabama and Georgia anyway, so it's like, well, like if Georgia loses to Alabama in the SEC title game, then in my opinion, they both get in and it's a null conversation anyway. And then it's like, well, what other 2 teams are battle fodder for them to beat up on? Now, the first college football playoff rankings did come out. You had Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2. I love that. I totally agree. Michigan State was number 3. That was surprising to me. I'm like, huh, all right. Then you have Oregon at number 4, who beat Ohio State earlier but lost to Stanford. And then you have Ohio State, whose only loss is to Oregon. It's very interesting. I was like, huh, that's a very... I don't know if I agree. I certainly think that like Ohio State's a better football team than Michigan State, but time will tell. So they had Cincinnati at number 6. I agree with that. I was surprised, though, because 9-0 Oklahoma was the number 8 team in the nation, and 8-0 Wake Forest was ranked number 9. This would have been a good year for an expanded college football playoff. Like, what if we got a year where Oklahoma, Wake Forest, Cincinnati, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan State, Alabama, and Georgia all got in and had to play each other and duke it out? And that'd be really fun. And so I've been, for a while, was on the fence. Like, should we expand the college football playoff? Now I'm kind of like, yeah, obviously it'd be really, really fun if that happened. And I'm all for that. That sounds like a lot of fun for the college football world.